Unfortunately, I don't know exactly when I went off air, so I'm gonna first of all, folks, apologize. For some reason, I got completely kicked out of the webinar, so I'm getting back in now. We'll start over to a certain extent just to make sure that for everybody's benefit, um, I haven't kind of assumed that you've heard everything I've said so far. Okay, so real quick, just a quick recap. I was covering the current state of the contact centers, the amount of calls they get. Approximately 270 billion calls are being made to the contact centers on an annualized basis. So if you think about it, a lot of phone calls compared to the amount of digital volumes you get in a particular enterprise, still the ratios are not the same. As in, I'll give you an example of one of the banks. They told us that the amount of digital touch points compared to the call volume that they get is still less than 25%. As in, digital is less than 25% of the total call volume they get, across the board, right? So the rest is actually, in their case, mostly IVR or call centers. And assuming now that, hey, you're getting a large volume of your support touch points through a IVR contact center, the amount of containment that you get through that contact center is again staggeringly low. We've seen ranges from 0%, which is obviously the lowest, all the way to, in some cases, we have seen, depending on the industry and the use case, in 60% range too, which is pretty good. And in very few cases above 60%. But if you average out on a global basis, what we've seen as the research numbers show is about 20 to 30%. It should be clear to you that if a call was actually contained by the IVR, as the user didn't have to drop off to an agent, the cost is low to the enterprise. But if the call does get dropped off to a human agent for various reasons, let's say whether the user did that, or there is a business reason why the IVR cannot handle that particular use case or that scenario and has to drop off to an agent, whatever the case may be, the cost is in some cases almost 12 times. A huge cost to the enterprise in that case whenever the user has to be handed off to a live agent. All in all, again, the pain points are generally pretty clear. But first of all, the wait times and the queue times tend to be really high, depending on the time of the day or the reasons you're calling for, because it may end up in a particular support queue for the particular kind of problem that you've expressed. The experience between IVR and the other channels that you may be using to engage with your enterprise are generally disconnected. Pretty much every enterprise we talk to these days, at least till now, will tell us that IVR is different from digital, meaning they're completely separate teams, even though they try and achieve the parity between the experiences they provide as much as they can, depending on the enterprise, of course, but separate teams, separate initiatives, separate timelines in terms of what one can do versus the other. And they're hardly ever in sync in terms of what the digital experiences are compared to the IVR experiences, which is another big problem from a customer point of view, where you get a very fragmented experience. And finally, again, the customer support experience itself is broken with the traditional IVR experience. We know what the traditional IVR experience is. Call the number, you get a menu, you traverse the menu structure. Sometimes there is 1 level, 2 levels, to finally either the menu results into an actual flow of a conversation where it'll ask me some information, my date of birth, my enter the account number by using the touchtone device, whatever the case may be. Or in some cases, it'll just simply hand off to an agent based on the type of problem that I'm expressing. Okay. But these traditional IVR experiences, fall flat because many a times these menus are very complex and confusing, multiple levels of menus that you have to navigate. I've actually seen 3 or 4 levels, which is actually even worse. But most of the time, it tends to have at least one or two levels of menus that you have to kind of traverse through. A lot of information gets put out in that process so that the user can make the right choice of or the right selection in the menu structure. Anytime it's not a simple number entry or or just simple information that you can provide through a touchstone type of interface, the data entry can be a huge problem. So I'm sure many of you have had to enter your date of birth in 2-digit month and 2-digit year, or 2-digit date as an example, or in a certain format, only because the IVR cannot accept a typical, well, I was born on June 12, 1979 or something like that, right? So again, that ability to even accept that as an input is just not there with traditional IVR experiences, which can also result into a drop off to the agents because you just can't even handle those use cases. The experience is non-intuitive, a lot of repetitive information, hard-coded information many a times that make it really a bad experience. And all in all, it makes it super easy for the user to just hit zero or just say representative and drop off to an agent. That's what I end up doing. As soon as I hear the first few things that the IVR says to me, I know it's a directed menu, directed dialogue, and I'm just not even, I have the patience to even kind of go through those menu structures anymore, and I'm going to just press zero and drop out, which again results into the high cost that the enterprises have to pay. Now, why conversational IVR? Well, it's pretty straightforward based on what we just said. The telephone volumes, as I said, are still significantly high, right? In fact, we are actually seeing that there isn't a gradual, like substantial decline in the call volumes. So a lot of the folks have been predicting for the last 5-10 years that, well, the amount of digital volume will keep going up, and that will take away from the amount of call volumes that the enterprise has to kind of field with or support. Again, I mean, in real life situations, we've seen, and it's still surprising, that digital hasn't even crossed 25% in certain cases in terms of the overall touch points, right? So there is still a very high number of telephone phone calls that the enterprises are getting that they still have to service. As an example, one of the telcos we're dealing with gets over 1 billion phone calls in a year, right? A bank, one of the top 4 banks in the country, gets about 500 million phone calls a year, right? So that is a staggering number of calls that they get in to service their just the retail client base, as an example, right? So it's still a very prominent, important channel. B, they can do a lot to improve the overall experience. And C, improve the containment rate. Can we move that bar up from 20-30% to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% so that the amount of calls dropping off to the agents are lower and lower, and the cost of the enterprise is less? So Gartner is predicting that there will be a 85%. Again, the analysts are predicting a pretty high number. I don't know if I believe that to be the case by 2020 at least, but they're predicting that 85% of the customer interactions will be handled without a human agent. Again, it's achievable. Not sure if I can. It's achievable by 2020, but that's what we need to explore. Okay. Now, what is conversational IVR? This is a question that honestly we get into a lot of discussion with every customers of ours that we deal with, because to many, conversational IVR is sort of like saying, well, in a few words, tell me what you're calling about. And if you say billing, if you say support, if you say technical support, they feel like that's conversational, right? Well, I say, no, that's not conversational at all. That's basically saying, instead of having to press one to say billing or go down the billing path, you just used a keyword like billing, just so that whatever I said, you're going to look for the word billing in that utterance, and go down a particular conversational IVR flow. So that's not conversational in our mind. Conversational in our mind is, I can use full-blown, unscripted, natural language utterances to say, I'm calling about my bill from June, the bill I received for, let's say, May 2019, and I want to dispute a charge. I should be able to say all of that. It should understand the context. It should know who I am. It should understand the intent of my calling the support center, which is I'm disputing a charge. I'm not just trying to check the balance of my bill. It should also get the data I provided and not have to ask me the same mundane questions like, which bill are you calling about that you want to dispute a charge on? It's about the May 2019 bill. And now take me through a journey or a conversational experience that can be more free flowing, can accept complex data inputs, can allow me to jump around in the conversation without having to kind of keep going, press 9 to go back to the previous menu, that type of experience. And then if in the event I do hand off to a live chat agent, the agent should have all the right context of my problem and understand my problem, right? Now, what I want to show you guys is some examples of conversational IVR experiences so that we can be on the same page around what we mean by conversational IVR. First example I'll actually show you is a example of calling a ride. We probably all used Uber by now to hail a ride. And we are working with Uber right now to actually explore how you can actually call, not just use the app. In certain countries, they actually support that. So that you can actually call Uber and say, I want a ride. And you can use complex information to accomplish that task, not just be very scripted in your flow. So let's actually go through that experience, and you guys will understand what we mean by conversational IVR. This was built on our technology, just to give you an idea, and I'll let you guys experience it.
Thanks for calling Uber. How can I help you today?
I need a ride.
Sure, I can help you with that. What's your pickup location?
I'm at SFO.
Got it. And what's your drop-off address?
I'm going to Union Square in San Francisco.
Great. I have you going from San Francisco International Airport to Union Square, San Francisco. Would you like an UberX for $35?
Yes.
Before I connect you to a driver, I just need you to confirm this $35 UberX. Would you like to confirm your ride?
Yes.
Thanks for your confirmation. I'm booking your ride now. Please expect a text message with a receipt and details about your driver and pickup ETA. What else can I help you with?
Let me take a quick pause and explain what's going on here, just so you guys understand. First of all, I was able to just, in this case, the user was able to basically just simply, say in natural language exactly what he was looking for. The intent was understood. That's one thing. He was able to provide things like SFO as an input, and landmarks like Union Square as another input, for example, right? Behind the scenes, just so you understand, our technology is actually making calls to things like Google APIs to convert that landmark into a real address, make sure SFO is a real airport code so that it comes back as, okay, that's actually in San Francisco Airport, let's say. It actually calls the Uber APIs to estimate a fare for that particular ride based on the lat-long information that we derive. And all of that in a sub-second response experience, so that to a user, it doesn't feel like, it's waiting a second or 2 or 5 seconds before it actually responds. And none of this feels mechanical, right, in terms of the experience that we are trying to drive. Now, this was just one interaction. Most of the time, we are all used to just doing one thing at a time with an IVR, because trying to do multiple things is even more painful, right? But now, let's say I requested this ride. I can actually continue this conversation. So the user is actually going to continue into other things that they want to do with the IVR, and the conversation keeps on going.
Thanks for calling Uber. How can I help you today?
My driver dropped me off at Market and Powell instead of Union Square.
I'm sorry you weren't dropped off at your desired location. I'm here to help. Did this happen on your most recent trip?
Yes.
Got it. I see that you were dropped off far away from the destination. I've credited you with $5 in Uber credits for your inconvenience. What else can I do for you today?
My credit card was charged for my last ride instead of my Uber credits. Please refund me and use those.
Okay, I can help you with your payment. Which of your recent trips do you want to use Uber credits for?
My last ride to Union Square.
Got it. You were charged $35 to your Visa card ending in 9876. Would you like me to refund your card and use Uber credits for this ride?
Yes.
Okay, I've refunded your Visa and charged your Uber credits instead. Please wait 5 to 7 business days for the refund to be reflected on your credit card statement. What else can I help you with?
I left my backpack in the Uber too.
Okay, I can help you with a lost item. Did this happen on your most recent trip?
Yes.
Got it. I've let your driver know that you lost an item in their car.
So as you can see, there's a lot of use cases here that apply to your typical Uber experience. But the point I wanted you guys to make sure you see here is that conversation can start with one reason for a phone call and lead to another and lead to another. It's contextual. I can feed it complex inputs sometimes. My last ride, to Union Square, and it'll actually understand exactly what you mean by it, extract the relevant information, and the conversation kind of keeps on going. And it's a very natural flowing conversation as if you were having with another human being. Now, mind you, it is still, a bot, a conversational IVR, experience that the user is experiencing, but I'm not having to get frustrated by this experience. I'm not having to repeat information. I'm not having to say, let me just press 0 and talk to a human being. I'm able to actually still get what I want to get done without having to, get dropped off. Okay. Now, let me show you another example of another kind of complex use case, not just a simple use case where I want to reschedule an appointment, right? So it's not just, hey, I want to give me an appointment at a certain time. There is actually a lot of back and forth negotiation, where the user is going to ask for, you have any slots available on so-and-so date and certain time frames, like in the mornings versus whatever. And the conversation can still be carried end to end without, again, dropping off to an agent. So let's experience this one as well.
Hi, I am your virtual assistant. How can I help you?
Reschedule my appointment.
Sure. Let me check the dates available. Okay. We can do Monday, 30th July or later. When would you like the appointment?
Do you have anything in the morning?
I don't have anything available at that time. But I do have slot at 1 p.m., 3 p.m. Would you like one of those?
How about July 31st?
Great. I do have slots available at 9 a.m. Shall I go ahead and make an appointment?
Yes, book please.
Okay.
All right, so this is another example of very interactive back and forth experience, and it is a contextual experience. So it remembered the fact that this person was looking for a morning appointment of whenever, even though the date kind of changed to whatever the new requested date was, it was still able to keep that in context and say, let me give you a morning appointment rather than multiple slots in the afternoon and others that I don't care for, right? So again, where this is an example of a conversation experience. Now, I want to make one quick point here before we continue. I'm sure you noticed the distinct difference in the way the actual conversational, the sound of the experience is, right? Meaning, when it spoke back to you, one is more mechanical than the other, right? Now that's text-to-speech technology that actually we don't provide. That's something that we leverage from whether it's Google, Nuance, or others like that. So depending on the customer, this is something that they tend to control in terms of what kind of conversation experience they want to provide. Lastly, of course, you can provide your recorded audio files where you have actual human voice talent record those messages, which we've had customers do as well, where they can record those messages and play those out. So just to compare, right? Traditional experiences tend to be menu driven. We know that. Versus we want conversational experiences to be, thank you for calling ABC. How may I help you, right? And we don't need to just use keywords. I could have rambled on for the full utterance, like, I'm calling about my bill, about May 2019, and I want to dispute a charge. And in all of that, maybe if all it understood was, okay, billing, then it'll take me to the next menu. It'll be super frustrating for me, right? Whereas I gave you all this information and you didn't understand any of it. Versus here, I may provide my intent. I may provide supporting information like the year, the month of the bill that I'm complaining about. All of that in an utterance, and it should understand. Traditional experience tends to be more directed, step by step, cannot skip around, cannot jump around into the conversation. Versus conversational IVR, in our opinion, needs to be more open dialogue, free flowing in the way the users can move through the conversation. So same thing goes for being able to switch intents, right? So I should be able to switch intents. I was in the middle of, let's say, maybe making a payment through an IVR, but then I said, well, hang on, let me check the balance of my bill of my accounts. It should know that I can pay a bill on hold for now. Let me get the bill balance first, come back with that information, allow you to continue from wherever you left off to kind of continue paying the bill and maintain the context, as I said, right? So the other thing that actually we are seeing a lot is disconnected experiences between IVR and digital. So this is another big frustration point for enterprises. I could have called an IVR. The IVR sometimes does offer me saying, well, can I send you text message alerts or something like that, for example, let's say on a flight status update or something along those lines. But again, that's completely disconnected from the IVR. And on that text message, again, those are all one-way alerts. Versus what you can do with conversational IVR is think of IVR and digital to be completely connected with each other, right? So we can actually say, well, based on the use case, let me switch over to digital, but you can actually continue the conversation in digital as well. So we had one of the telcos actually, think about these use cases similar to a bank as well, where based on the type of use case, leverage the IVR and the digital experience in conjunction. All in all, we believe conversational IVR can actually really, really improve your customer experience, make it more richer. So to explain that further, here's an example of a customer that we were dealing with. It's a large telco. They had, in fact, going back to the numbers for a second, their containment rates were in that same vicinity that you saw earlier, which is basically actually even below 20s, right? The IVR experience was frustrating, a lot of menus, to have to kind of go through. And think about a use case like disputing a charge or calling to ask your telco, why is your bill so high, as an example, and trying to actually listen to all your charges being read out to you on an IVR experience. That's, again, a huge kind of blowout to the way the current experiences should be, right? So they were suffering from the containment, trying to improve the containment rate. That's one problem. Second is the experience. Third is the inter-agent handoff. So that keyword-based NLU, that we were talking about earlier, where based on whatever keyword it found, it would actually put you in a certain queue into a support desk. And turns out, it just took you to, let's say, checking your bill balance queue, right? Rather than disputed charge, which may be two different support centers. And now I have to go from one agent wasting his time trying to learn about my problem and cannot deal with my problem, going to another agent pool who needs to now dispute my charge, right? So the user is frustrated and you just wasted two agents' time. So From a solution point of view, we worked with them. They were a Genesis IVR, infrastructure. So we integrated our technology with Genesis. From a speech recognition and speech output point of view, we were, again, as I said, we don't provide the technology. We leverage, the best in class as it stands right now. In our opinion, it's Google and Nuance who tend to be the best when it comes to the ASR. ASR is basically the speech recognition. And then from a text to speech point of view, again, what we've seen so far, at least for the large enterprises, Google and Nuance again tends to be the best, where they're using either pure TTS, text to speech, or in many cases, they're also using voice talent audio recordings to provide that experience. Now, the amount of phone calls they get are actually in millions. And these are all, checking the status of a particular order or a ticket you opened or a technical support issue or just disputing a charge on a bill or explaining your bill charges, etc. Finally, what we demonstrated to them is that, a conversational IVR can significantly improve the overall intent recognition. So they saw the intent recognition go up in the 90s, in high 90s actually. So regardless of what the user said, whether it was just short billing or agent or support or whatever, or the user said long sentences, we were able to understand that and still map it to the right intent of the user and down the right kind of conversational path. Second is all the data that the user provided was also appropriately kind of passed on, so that they can actually skip the steps where I have to request some of the data that he's already provided. We actually automated a large chunk, 1/3 basically, as a step one, large chunk of their calls, so that the entire conversation is completely automated by us. However, as a progressive path towards the journey, 2/3 were still going to the traditional, IVR flows, so that the intent was recognized by Core. However, the actual IVR flow was still being triggered by us, so that the current BAU would act as it is. Okay, so again, it was the journey that they were on. And lastly, the inter-agent handoff, right? So if the intent recognition was accurate, then the amount of times where that user got bounced around between two different support centers or multiple support centers also came down dramatically, right? So it also reduced the amount of cost that every agent time was spent explaining or understanding the user's problem multiple times. So that was one of the case studies, and again, we would love to kind of work with you guys on your kind of conversational IVR journey. The benefits on the contact center are pretty straightforward. Of course, reduce the cost that you have to deal with when it comes to supporting the call volumes. The other is obviously improve the customer satisfaction. So if the conversation experience is better, if the reason why obviously the customer has to call for a reason, but if the user is getting a good experience, then there's more brand loyalty, and the improvement in customer experience will keep kind of happening over a period of time. We've also seen that the self-service, which is basically the containment, goes up. This depends on the amount of use cases and the type of use cases you pick, obviously. So it requires a bit of study and analysis to figure out where you're going to see the higher improvement in containment rate. Of course, if your containment rate is sitting at 0 right now, improving that is not a big deal. But if your containment rate is sitting in the, let's say 60s, 70s, 80%, then we have to look at exactly where you can further see an improvement in your overall experience. The other very important benefit that particularly for the enterprise is the turnaround time, right? So one of the things we've also seen that with traditional IVRs is the amount of time it takes to make changes in the IVR flows is substantially high. So this is one of the complaints we've heard from enterprises, that it takes too much effort to modify those IVR flows. They're too complex, too painful to change, maintain over a period of time. With a conversational experience that core platform provides, you can actually significantly reduce that the time it takes to make your changes to the IVR. So from an approach point of view, here is what we would recommend. We would want to kind of work with you to figure out what are the current issues. Some of this can be known. Some of this is something that we need to discover together, right? What are the types of issues? Is it intent recognition? Is it that you cannot automate a certain conversation flow? Is it the type of data inputs that you need? Are there business rules why you're having to have such a high drop-off rate? So understanding the current issues and being clear on them is important. To do that, of course, you need to listen to phone calls, listen to how the agents are actually solving the challenges for the user once it does go to the agent. Looking at some of your statistics, typically, you would want to start with your top 20, top 10 call types, which is generally where, 70-80% of the volume tends to be in the top 20 call types, as an example. Then you may have a long tail of calls that you get that doesn't actually have the high call volumes. But you could start there as a way to understand that in those top 20 call types, how much is the containment per call type, and then where is the room for improvement. And that analysis is important. The other thing is, understanding your current kind of architecture as well, and enabling more kind of customer specific scenarios that you can enable. So as an example, some of you may have experienced a predictive IVR behavior where the bot is automatically trying to pick off based on who the user is and say, you might be calling about this. And all the user has to say is yes, right? As an example, you could have called, let's say, a airline, and based on your phone number, based on who you are, it could have said, well, I see that you're supposed to be on a XYZ flight and we know it's delayed. Are you calling about that flight? And the user could have just said yes, and automatically you have the intent recognized, which flight he's on, and you can lead straight into giving him some other flight choices, etc. Right? So again, we have to kind of think about those experiences. And finally, the combination of IVR and digital, right? So can we, have a duopoly between IVR and digital so that I can start a conversation in IVR and continue that conversation in digital? And that could be a path towards transitioning more and more customers towards the digital experience. And it's not a matter of can it be done. It can be done. We've done it already for customers. It's a matter of kind of looking at your use case and figuring out what works for you. Okay. From an architecture point of view, let me quickly cover that. One of the things we do is we keep your current IVR infrastructure as is. So whether you're using Genesys, Cisco, Avaya, etc., we've integrated with all of them actually by now. We've integrated with all of them actually already. So we keep the current IVR infrastructure as is. These IVRs may be leveraging a ASR technology or a text-to-speech technology as well. Again, we can leverage those as is as well. But from a core point of view, we slowly start taking every call that comes in. We take the intent of we take the utterance from what the caller said, and we want to start recognizing the intent of the user. And then we may automate the conversation right away on day one, or you may slowly evolve where more and more conversations are automated based on the call types you decide to automate over 30, 60, 90, 180, 360 days, and lay out a journey for yourselves. Now, whenever the escalation to the agent happens, we can escalate to an agent as well and pass all the context of the conversation to the agent through a screen pop. From an architecture point of view, we provide a end-to-end conversational AI platform. That's what Kore is all about. It's not just about IVR, it's also IVR and digital experiences to create these virtual agents. This is one of the reasons why you can actually achieve the duopoly between IVR and digital. And we give you a full soup to nuts platform for you to design, develop, build, and create these experiences in a very, very rapid manner, and take your IVR, conversational IVR solutions live. To give you that example of the telco, we actually implemented if I 157 intents, if I remember the exact number, and automated 1/3 of the call volume within a 2-month time frame. So within 2 months, we built that entire conversational AI solution. Actually, they did. We supported them, and they were in QA within 2 months, and then once they did their QA and UAT, they went live with their users. So this could be a very, very rapid turnaround for you to kind of go down this journey if that's of interest. We've been around for over 5 years now, lots of large enterprise customers, which is where our focus is. We work with the likes of Verizon, Citibank, Uber as an example, over 70 customers at this point in time. And we have 250 employees in the company, and we continue to kind of keep growing in this particular space, particularly conversational IVR. So thank you. Let me stop there and let's take some questions. And before we start, apologies for the technical difficulty earlier, but I hope you've actually kind of gotten the content that you're looking for. Let's take some questions. Aman, are there questions that have already come in?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Let me read them out to you. So the first one is, describe the unique features or services that your platform provides that enable your clients to deliver an improved and differentiated caller experience.
Okay, so yeah, there's some background noise. Praneeth, maybe go on mute. Okay, so first of all, from a platform point of view, there are various capabilities that we offer. One is, and apologies, I didn't mention this because I didn't go into the technical details there. The way we support IVR as a channel within our platform is actually by supporting VXML as a standard. Okay, so all the VXML standards in terms of managing the call flow and context setting, the speech grammars, the ASR grammar context, the whether it's DM context, etc. We are able to actually do that dynamically, at runtime to actually provide that experience that you would need. That's one thing. Second thing is, and so providing that voice XML support automatically allows us to leverage all the standard voice XML properties that a traditional IVR would anyways have to support, right? As you may know, voice XML is a standard within the IVR space. Now, the other thing is being able to actually improve the overall NLU, as in the natural language understanding. As I gave you the example, most of the customers are either currently doing keyword-based NLU, which is definitely rudimentary, and even in that, what they see is the NLU is still not good, nowhere in the 90s. And whenever the NLU is incorrect, they end up doing the inter-agent handoff, which again is going to cost them twice or thrice to go from one agent to the next from a support center point of view. Okay, so we are at this point probably one of the best NLU platforms in the industry. So that'll automatically improve your recognition rate, understand the user's intent, get you to the right kind of flow in the conversation. Whether that flow is automated or not, that depends on where you are in your journey, let's say. And if it is in fact automated, then we will actually execute the entire conversation flow on our end. Okay. The last is, from a rapid deployment and change point of view, there are a lot of features that we provide and a lot of tooling we provide for you to also constantly analyze. By the way, we have a lot of analytics in our platform that allows you to look at 100,000 calls came in. Let me actually look at those calls and figure out kind of how where are they going? Are they ending up with an agent or not? Why are they ending up with an agent? Etc. And then now constantly make improvements and changes to your to your conversational flow based on what you've defined. We also have a capability in our platform that can actually take your raw transcripts of conversations from the agent conversations and actually auto-identify new intents and new conversation flows based on whatever is dropping off to the agent, as an example. So those are some, examples of capabilities that are on our platform that sets us apart from others that you might have experienced in this place.
Okay, so the next question is, are these typically ROI positive projects? If so, what is the timeline for returns?
Yeah, they are. So far, they've all been ROI positive. The timeline is a slightly difficult question because it depends on the customer and the enterprise and the amount of containment they were able to achieve, right? So that can be subjective. But I can take an example, as I said. So the example of the telco, within 2 months, we took them into UAT. They spent about actually 2 months in UAT, largely because of internal processes, which in my opinion could have been done in a month, but okay. So within 4 months, we implemented 150 plus intents from a training and natural language understanding point of view. We automated 1/3 of the conversation flows, and they already saw an uptick in containment and the reduction in the inter-agent handoff within that 4-month time frame. So whatever was actually spent to achieve that was actually, the ROI was established within that first year itself. Okay. Now, as I said, they didn't actually tackle the 2/3 of the volume yet, which they could have, or they will, so that they can keep seeing the improvement. But to your ROI question, yes, there is positive ROI, and the time frame it takes to achieve that can be subjective depending on the customer and the use cases.
Next question. Are we leveraging conversational IVR capabilities integrated with CRM systems?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as I explained to you, on behind the scenes, just like your current IVR apps would talk to APIs, which may be your CRM APIs or whatever APIs that whatever systems you're talking to through that API interface. In the Kore.ai platform talks to those same APIs, by the way. So if your CRM is, let's say, Salesforce, we would obviously call Salesforce APIs. And let's take the example of the ride, right? So when the user said, "Yeah, I'm calling about that ride that I took to Union Square," we are calling the backend APIs to pull up the customer's information and the rides the user took, and validating against that ride to say, "Oh yeah, there was a recent ride. It was to Union Square. Okay, I have the right, information about the customer as well as the ride in order to now proceed forward." So we are absolutely using the CRM integration on the back end, regardless of what that CRM is. That is irrelevant to us.
Okay, quickly doing a time check. It's 12:01, so I'll ask you one final question. We covered this a little bit, but what differentiates you the most from competitors?
Our comprehensive platform, which includes the widest channel coverage, both IVR and digital. Our support for various existing IVR standards and platforms that makes it easy for enterprises to migrate to a conversational IVR experience. We're not talking about ripping out your existing IVRs and replacing with something. So you can keep your Genesys, your Avaya, your Cisco, etc., and we would simply integrate into them. Our best-in-class natural language understanding capabilities, which are above par than the industry, and our tooling and operational tools that we provide, both in terms of analytics as well as the development tools we provide, so that the time it takes to actually build a bot that enables conversational IVR experience is a matter of maybe weeks and months at best, versus what we've heard is, in order to introduce one IVR flow, for example, can take months and months at a time. And here we are talking about implementing a conversational IVR experience for 150 plus intents and X number of conversational flows, all within a matter of 2 months, right, from start to finish. So the tooling is another big differentiator. We are also available on premise, by the way. So many a times these IVR infrastructures are on premise. So our entire platform can be available on premise for you to deploy side by side with your Genesis or something like that. So again, remember, IVRs are synchronous experiences. So you need that sub-second response on the phone call, or else the user is going to hang up or press 0. So again, that makes a big difference too. So there is, in some cases, no cloud calls necessary whatsoever.
Great. Well, thanks, Amit, and thanks everyone for listening. I hope you found this helpful and informational, and you know where to find us to, so check out our platform more, and always let us know how we can help you deploy these in your companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.